things were a lot different, a lot more civilized, and everybody was more on the spiritual path. But you had the Aryans come down from the north and start to take over. They settled first in North India, right close to Tibet. And you got to understand how crafty these people was. They had an agenda. And the agenda was clear as day. To basically, at first, you sprinkle in white people here and there, sprinkle in Aryans. Their goal was to go throughout every civilization around the world and interbreed. Plain and simple, that was the goal, to mix. To go in, mix in with everybody, and then try to, develop their race more. Now you have white person married to Indian person, and then if this person was from a prominent house, they can move up, or their children could be the heir, or what have you. So their goal was to basically interbreed and to try to get into positions of power, to breed into positions of power. And this is what they did. The Huns caught on to it. You start getting over to China, Cambodia, and stuff like that. Mongolia, they caught on. Japanese, they caught on. They kicked the white people out. They kicked the Aryans out. They left and they fled over to Europe. But you already had people there. So their goal was to breed, plain and simple. They come in super nice, no problems, teaching what they know, bringing what they could. And, us being so peaceful, loving people, which we was, they changed that. And we let them in, of course, because we understood where it was coming from. We understood what took place. They had a plan. Come out, interbreed, mix in, phase one. And once they got into positions of power, got the layout, and understand what was going on, to basically invade and take over, and that's exactly what they did. Now, when you pay attention, this has been the MO of Aryan people, of white people, for a long time. Again, we know with slavery. Same thing they did. See, again, we were stuck on slavery. We ain't look back and see that, wait a minute, they did this before to us. Came in all nice, basically settled in, then took over. They did the same thing with slavery. They came in, this time they had religion. And they came in with religion peacefully, and then set up shop, learned the layout, and then took over, these Aryans. Now remember, the Andaman, understanding what took place. Now you understand when I talked about this before, I showed you the pictures and everything about how no white people can go anywhere near Andaman land. Can't go there. They will kill you. They ain't taking nothing from the white man. They not playing because they understand the past, and they pass it down. You have civilizations on this planet still living like they lived 2,000 years ago. No TV, no electricity. They don't even understand what we understand. They live in truly spiritual, and for the most part, a lot of them are left alone because most of them are in areas now that has no real resources that they can use, as far as like oil or, plutonium or what have you, stuff like that. They don't have that kind of stuff. Uranium, I meant to say. They don't have that kind of stuff. They don't have, like the minerals and stuff like that, but they have food, they have what they need to survive. So you got to understand, the Aryans, and you got to understand why, that name was changed. And a lot of people, we don't refer to them as Aryans, we just say Europeans, but really Aryans is what they're supposed to be called. Now, again, make sure we're talking about the same people here. When you look up Aryans, Aryan, it says, relating to or denoting a people speaking an Indo-European language who invaded northern India in the 2nd millennium BC, displacing the Dravidian and other aboriginal people. Telling you clear as day. Yeah, they came in there, basically took over. These Indo-Europeans. What is an Indo-European? Let's look. It says, the Indo-European languages have a large number of branches: Anatolian, Indo-Iranian, Greek, Italic, Celtic, Germanic, Armenian, Tocharian, Balto-Slavic, and Albanian. I guess they wanted to put Indo-Iranian there, to sound exotic, but you have Proto-Indo-Iranian, which basically means common Aryan, plain and simple. So all the same people, when you look at it, we're talking about Europeans, white people, that basically came in, telling you clear as day, they came in and took over. And we got to understand the change that happened once they took over, because it's not something that you're going to really read too much about in school. You're just not going to talk about the stuff. But it makes a big difference when you try to understand what took place over there in, the Western the Far East, what happened in so-called Middle East and West Africa. It's a lot of stuff that was going on in that area during this time, all going back to the Aryans. Now, the thing is, if you say that, Hinduism was basically brought in by the Aryans, by doing that, not only can you take control and responsibility for the Hindu religion, the Hindu faith, because, Siddhartha was a Hindu, a Hindu prince. You can also take control of Buddhism. You can take control of both religions by saying, no, we came in and we set up Hinduism in northern India, and by default, Buddhism is ours as well. Now, here's the thing, and some of y'all smart enough to understand this. One, think about the time frames, time period. We're talking about 1500 BCE. When you understand the nature of Buddhism and what it's talking about on a spiritual level, what it's really getting into, if the Aryans came into North India with that information, with that knowledge already in 1500 BCE, there is no way they would need to come into Egypt for any knowledge. They wouldn't need it. They would know it already. The Greeks talk about, Herodotus and Thales, Diodorus, all of these Greek scholars and Greek philosophers. Everybody came into Kemet to learn. If they had that knowledge already and brought it into northern India, we wouldn't be talking about what we're talking about now. They would have never needed Kemet. Because when you break down the Buddhist faith, which we're going to get into and break it down, it is basically talking about what the Egyptians talked about. Plain and simple. It's just switched up into different gods, different stories, talking about the same exact stuff. Plain and simple. And if they understood that and it was the ones who brought it there, clear outright lie you just saw on Wikipedia, Google, or what have you. If they brought it there, they wouldn't need to come into Kemet or learn or to know anything. They would have had the knowledge. So again, this is how they trying to take over and say that they had this knowledge. They came in there, they understood this stuff, when clearly there's no way they could have really understood it. The Egyptians taught a lot of esoteric information, a lot of esoteric knowledge that only certain people will understand. And to have a faith like Hinduism and Buddhism that is wrapped up in that same kind of knowledge, for you to bring it in means you are a smart people. Now understand, when they came in to northern India, they basically invaded, and they invaded the Indus Valley and started enslaving people. They also invaded West Ethiopia, the shoreline, all across there. The first boats that pulled up and started really enslaving Africans was over there in Ethiopia. Before the whole transatlantic slave trade. We talk about that. We talk about the sub-Saharan, but it's a huge slave trade that took place with the Africans before all that. And it happened with the Ethiopians. And they enslaved them. They enslaved the people in the Indus Valley. And they set up a system of oppression that unbelievably still exists today in India. We talk about something that was set up 1500 BCE, 1000 BCE, around that time, that still exists today. A system in India. Some of you may have heard about it. It still exists, that they set up. This stuff blows my mind sometimes, man. How could the world allow some of this stuff to happen? It bothers you when you really understand the history of it. Because then when you look at the history and we say, well, wait a minute, this stuff was happening in ancient times. Why are we allowing it to happen in India now, today? 2017, this stuff is still going on. That is like them bringing back slavery. It's the same thing. It's like them bringing it back. Whole slave trade. And then nobody's saying nothing. Now, here's the thing you got to think about. Now, we just read, where it says that the Aryans basically came into North India and basically displaced the Aboriginals and the Dravidians or what have you. Now, you're going to think to yourself, well, wait a minute. If white people basically came and invaded in this valley in India, what have you, where are they? Where are they today? You look over there, you don't really see too many white people. You see a lot of dark skin. So you would think to yourself, where are these white people at? Where are these Aryans? The agenda was to simply mix in. And they are smart in what they do. They mix in, they get into positions of power, and they cause unrest. They cause unrest, they cause war. Now the thing is, once war break out, and once it's a full-fledged assault and you have an enemy now, it's the same stuff, people. This stuff is not new, what they are doing. Now it's an enemy. Once this whole displacement happened, because they moved into a position of power where they can overthrow the ruling class, they can move into positions that's, in the government, high-ranking positions, and they can change things. Once they have control of the high-ranking officials, the government system, or what have you, and then they instill this war, and this war causes displacement or what have you, it's not really safe for white people then, because one, they knew they weren't going to be able to come in there and completely invade and take over the entire country. They will be, outnumbered by the people. So this is chess. They had a strategic plan. You get in there, you cause dysfunction. Right after you eventually take over the royal family, you take over the people that's in positions of power, and you replace them with somebody who's going to take orders from somebody on the outside. So that's basically what took place. So then you had what happened. What you had happen was these people came in, they set up, they took over, and then you have, for a period of time, war. Everybody who's white, of course, they had to flee the country, but the damage was already done. They still left, mixed race people in there, lighter people, lighter skinned people. And all this does is cause division once you make it cause division. Before, we're looking at it as Africans, okay, he's light, so what? I'm dark skinned, my son's mom is dark skinned, we both really dark. He's light brown, so, it doesn't matter. That's how we have kids. So different skin tones. Until you make it about skin color, which is what they did eventually. But, once they have control of the government and the system, and then they leave and people think, okay, well, we got to worry about these people coming back. So again, you can set up policies and rules, and you can be like, well, something is wrong with the dark-skinned people. They are evil. The light-skinned people tend to do things better. These dark-skinned people from the ancient times, they only know the ancient ways. They are evil, da-da-da. And they can make up whatever kind of situation that they want to control the people. And this is basically what took place and what they did. So what you will have is, order out of chaos. Once they have control of the government, they can come in and offer a solution to the problem that they created. So now the people who are left after this tragedy or war, what have you, they're sitting around thinking that, okay, our government is going to do what's in the best interest of the people. And then that never happens. And they can never figure out why it seems like the government is going away from the people. And they don't realize that their government and their government officials and all their leaders have basically been taken over, and they are now under control of the same enemy they just got finished fighting. So now we got to think back to Adolf Hitler. And then you got to start understanding what's the whole Aryan thing about. And everybody heard, white power, Aryan race, everything. But a lot of people didn't understand the history. Aryans, what is that? And people, they didn't know. They couldn't fathom that it's an ancient history that Hitler is talking about. One, he used the swastika. And a lot of people didn't understand what it was. When you look at the swastika clockwise, it's talking about the sun. It means the sun. This is an ancient symbol, ancient Hindu symbol. Plain and simple, he used. Remember, they invaded northern India. It's an ancient Indian symbol. Clockwise is talking about the sun. Counterclockwise is talking about Kali. And we know Kali is the goddess, the black goddess of time, creation, destruction, and power. The black goddess of time, creation, destruction, power. Plain and simple. This is what they are using with the swastika. And you got to understand the meaning behind it. And one, we can see clear as day. It's going back into India. So now you have the connection fitting. It fits. It fits. You have the Aryans with Hitler, talking about the Aryan race. And then you have the connection with India. And people who knew their history back then can clearly make that connection. I know the people in India, they were shivering. They was probably scared as hell when they started hearing about Hitler and see what he was doing and seeing how, powerful he became, in his rise. And, it was a big deal. So then, what was Hitler really all about? He was about the master race, the Aryans, the pure white Aryans, so-called pure white. And maybe Hitler didn't know, maybe Hitler knew something that we don't know. But you got to think about that. One, if you understand that you can't get Caucasians without African people, what's the problem? So what pure race was he talking about? What master race was he talking about? Did Hitler understand? Did he know that they were albinos, that white people came from black people? Did he know this? What was he talking about? Pure blood white race. So again, touched on this a little bit in Saturn and Satan. We'll get into more in this series. But, Hitler looked and saw that the Jews were growing in power. The plan was for the white race, the master race, to go ahead and basically take over and conquer the whole world. But you see these Jews in your country making a killing, rising in power. They're not pure white. As I talked about before, the Jews that you see in Israel, the ones you see in Israel now today, are a mix of Greeks and Arabs. Basically a mix of Aryans and Dravidians, you might as well say, which is why they call them sand niggers. They're mixed. They're not pure white. And they was rising in power. And it was taking over shit. Not just that, Hitler understood the lie of the Bible. Not only is they taking over, they are in the Bible making themselves as being the chosen people of God. And using that platform to propel himself into higher levels of power. And Hitler, he wasn't having it. And you got to understand, one, we look at some of these Jews and they look just as white as, some of the people. Sometimes you see a person that's Jewish and you can't really tell that they're not white. And you got to understand, one, the people who are in power over Judaism, they're not Jews. They're Aryans. And that's the thing. That's what really took place. The whole thing was a setup with Hitler. As I talked about before, I mentioned this, a setup. It was a setup. One, it was a setup to get the sympathy to establish the nation of Israel. That's what it was about. To cause an event or series of events that was so heinous, that Israel could be established. That's what it was about. He was unleashed on the Jews. Now, the Jews who suffered through the Holocaust and all the stuff that they went through were, mixed race people. The real people behind it were Aryans, white people. Remember, I talked about in the series, the one that's on the Bible and the one that's on Hebrew Israelites. Who created Judaism? I told you, the Greeks. Clear as day. Who the Greeks? They're part of the Aryan race. Aryans. So the Greeks created Judaism. So why would they go back and be like, oh, well, you guys ain't, pure white, da-da-da. They understand what's going on. It's all smoke and mirrors. Which is why what happened towards the end. They got Hitler out of there. What probably really happened. I don't think he killed himself. They got all the scientists out of there. They used that time to basically experiment with chemical weapons, to experiment with all kinds of machines, all kinds of technology that they couldn't otherwise do, or in a controlled country, where people's looking and they have press, free press. So the war was just perfect for them to test out everything, which is why we seen Hitler come up with all kinds of stuff that they built, and they basically was testing and everything was going on. It just got to the point where, one, it was enough to establish Israel, but two, too many people around the world was concerned about it. And America was kind of too nonchalant about the whole situation, making it seem like they was involved. What happened, it died down. So now if you are the Aryan race, if you are the Catholic Church that's running all three major religions, and you understand, well, wait a minute, you have a group of Jews. The Jews is basically moving up fast in power. They are gaining wealth, a lot of wealth, to where they're going to be able to challenge us. And remember, they're not really pure white. Something has to really be done. So they killed two birds with one stone. One, by wiping them out, those rich people, the ones who they couldn't control or bring on board, they killed. And they limited their wealth and their reach. So that happened, and then at the same time, they could establish Israel. It's the same thing. And, I heard a lot of people talking about Queen Elizabeth, her bloodline goes back to Jewish families. Yeah, it may seem that way, but no, she's Aryan just like the rest of them. They wanted to look that way. It's the same situation. They infiltrated into royal families, plain and simple. And when it came time to bear an heir, they intermarried, they interbred. They didn't mix with the people who they took over, with the kingdoms they took over. So it's like, okay, well, this is a black kingdom. Let me come in, marry this black dude, and we have an heir, a mixed baby. That wasn't the case. It was you come in, you marry the dude, something happened to him, and they intermarry within the interbreed within the race, and they have a pure heir. And this is the whole bloodline thing that we hear so much about. They're talking about goes back farther than people understand. It's the same thing. They are basically telling you this whole story. The Aryans invading, the bloodlines being intermarried by Aryans, basically them taking over. You are seeing all this play out in Game of Thrones. This is exactly what they're talking about. It's history. They're just disguising it very well. But when you understand and look at it, Game of Thrones is telling you exactly what's going on. You have the Lannisters. Blonde hair, white people, clear as day. The trademark of them, the blonde hair. What happened? They she married into a royal family. She didn't bear children to the king. She, messed with her brother and had children, heirs to the throne. And you see how dysfunctional they was because, it was inbreeding and the kids wasn't right. And now what happened? She ends up on the throne, just like Queen Elizabeth. But that's a different story. But even still, she ends up on the throne. Now, you look at Game of Thrones, you look at the whole thing with the White Walkers. It's the same thing. The White Walkers, the blue eyes, White Walkers. Where are the White Walkers going? They're going to Castle Black. All the kingdoms throughout Game of Thrones are basically African kingdoms, you might as well say. Black kingdoms that once stood, that was taken over. The Lannisters' whole ordeal is to take over the 7 kingdoms. Plain and simple. So it's trying to show you what white people are trying to do. You have the White Walkers coming in to Castle Black in the north. Remember, you had the north. Where is the White Walkers coming from? Far north. Where did the Aryans come from? North. Coming down, the first place they reach, Castle Black. And then you have the north where you have the, what's the name of the family? The Starks. And notice the Starks. Whenever you see the Starks, like the Stark men, from the beginning all the way up to now, they always wear black. Plain and simple. They always wear black. So, once you get through the Night's Watch at Castle Black, you will be in the north where the Starks are. And it's this whole war for the throne. Then you have the queen, the mother of dragons, Daenerys Targaryen. What is her role? One, she's leading a group, an army of slaves to take back what's rightfully hers, the throne. She has dragons, which dragons are called, Sambo. So it's basically telling you who she representing, basically. It's easy for you to not be able to see it because they throw a white face on it. But when you look at the symbolism, it all goes back to us. We are the original dragons, plain and simple. And you look at the Unsullied, who the leader dude was black. They were castrated, which we were castrated during slavery. The whole Game of Thrones thing is basically telling you exactly what I'm going to be talking about here, exactly what I talked about already. Same situation, going out and conquering and succeeding. And it's disguised very well. But when you watch it and when you understand real history, you can see exactly what it's really talking about. Remember Daenerys, her throne was in a pyramid, giant pyramid. And remember, you had what happened to the Starks basically happened to us. Remember, the Starks ruled the north, and they had allegiance from all the other nations. Remember, all the nations pledged allegiance to the Starks, to help them out. And when it came time for war, when they fell, none of those nations came to their aid. It's the same thing what Dr. Clark talked about before, how nobody came to the aid of Egypt. Everybody owes Egypt. And, when it was being attacked, none of the nations came to their aid. Nobody came to help them out. It was the same thing with the Stark. So, all that is symbolism, basically telling you exactly, what happened in history, and they are good at mixing in, stories and fiction and everything to bring the story to life more, to make it appeal more to people, but really they're telling you a story that really actually took place in history. So now, as I was saying, when the Aryans invaded, you had this system that was set up that still exists today. And as I said, they enslaved the Ethiopians as well. So you had this whole system that's set up called the caste system. We have a class system here in America. We know upper class, middle class, or what have you. They had a caste system, except for their system is far more, disgusting, sick. So, the caste system, you had basically two things. You had the Varna, which means color, and you had the Jeti, which means birth. Based on the Varna and the Jeti, these two things, you was placed into one of four castes. And the four castes is basically, you have the Brahmins, and the Brahmins were basically priests, prominent people that was in the highest positions of the Varna, to tell you the truth. Don't expect them to be all light-skinned. You can be dark-skinned if you sold out. If you sold out, you got put in high status. You had the Kshatriyas, who basically were rulers and warriors. Same thing with the skin. If you sold out, you got different positions. You had the Vaishyas, who were farmers, we say crass peoples, traders, and stuff like that. Then you had the Sutras. And the Sutras was basically at the bottom. The Sutras had to basically tend to everybody else in the caste system. They was basically like servants, slaves, you might as well say. And they had to basically serve everybody else in the higher caste system. And we have, like I said, we got a class system, they had the caste system. Now, with the Sutras, they treated like shit. And again, had to do everything people in other castes told them to do. And as I said, this system is still in place. So again, when we look back at history, a lot of people have no clue about this stuff. I don't understand the history behind it. But this is what they instilled way back, 1000, 1500 BCE or what have you. This is what they instilled first. And they instilled it with the Ethiopians and as well as everybody over in the Indus Valley. And they set up this whole caste system to control the people. So again, when you blend in with people and you start, having these lighter shades of people, you create racism. And this is what they set out to do a long time ago. They created it. So then you have people who resemble, light-skinned, whiter people who got looked up to more and or was placed in higher positions based upon their skin color. This was taking place. So the caste system separated everybody. Because, of course, if you black and I'm black, but you in a higher caste, I'm not looking at you the same. You're a sellout. And, it's separation is what they created. So these are the four castes that people were broken up into. Now, understand, there's a fifth caste. Really, the fifth caste is the first caste. Now, when I was talking about before, how you had the Aryans coming down into Ethiopia and enslaving the Ethiopians. Now, remember, the Greeks and the ancient Egyptians had a name for the Indians. They called them the Dravidians. Now, the Dravidians were also known as Ethiopians. That's basically who they were. Now, the Ethiopians was also called the Dalits by the Aryans. And the Dalits was the first caste. That's who they was enslaving first, the Ethiopians. Now, caste, back during that time when they first started enslaving Ethiopians, caste meant pure, unmixed, basically. So pure breed, unmixed, pure race, the pure black Africans, the pure Africans. So this is what caste meant back then. Now, later on, it took on the Portuguese definition of caste, which basically means race, breed, or lineage. This is what they broken up into. So why the new definition is because later, of course, there was a mixing in with the Dravidians, the Indians or what have you, and diluting them and, mixing in and causing separation amongst the people.